probably.
Okay. Yeah, it was, I
Should be able
wrote
to get
that
in.
down.
You should be able to get in now, right?
Couple minutes, column. Yeah, I wrote that down.
Hey Tom, can you hear me okay?
What?
Hey, yeah, we're getting ready to log in here. Can you guys mute or what? Right. Never mind. Okay, we're trying to get logged.
Sharon just didn't want it.
We're trying to get logged in here, having some connectivity issues.
Well, I'd like to do it.
A lot of folks learning Zoom too. We'll get there.
Well.
Can you all hear me okay?
I can hear you just fine.
Okay, thanks, Melissa.
I can hear you too, and I can hear everybody else too, Corey.
Great. Well, as soon as you guys are ready, just let me know. I'll just hang out here. I could take over and DJ and kick off a presentation whenever you're ready, but I don't want to get ahead of Tom. What area does Central Illinois Beekeepers cover? I used to work out of Illinois and dispatch some trucks, so I'd probably recognize the area if I heard some towns.
Mostly McLean County, like Bloomington, Normal.
Okay. Okay, you're on further north.
We're pretty much between Chicago and St. Louis,
Okay.
right along 55 and right between Quad Cities and the southeast portion of the state. We're right in the middle.
Okay. I used to work out of Litchfield, Illinois, but you know, they would run up. I don't even know if they went to Springfield or not, but we would do St. Louis and run pretty much almost to the Indiana line. You would view that as more southern.
Yeah, yeah, that would seem more southern. I gotta say hi to Kara Likey. How are you, Kara?
Hi, Kathy, I'm good. How's e-learning going in your house?
Is there supposed to be e-learning going on?
Uh, yeah.
I don't know what else supposed to happen, but I am not hovering. I said, hey, did you check your computer? Yeah, I'm doing it now. And a door's closed, so that's as far as we got.
Yeah, Nora knows what she's doing. She's good.
Okay, I trust that. I also trust that you're kind of watching some things from the background. Hey there,
I'll check
Kretz.
tomorrow.
There's my honey. Hi, Tom.
Alright, hey, alright, so sorry we're late, had a lot of network connectivity issues, well, actually, we didn't have any network connectivity issues, we had login issues here at the extension office, so.
PK's not here.
Get started.
Yeah.
You're the president, so go ahead.
Yeah, all right.
Oh, how
Here she is.
Here I am. I'm trying to.
17 easy steps. We'll get to it.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, we've got our big class this weekend, Saturday. We have approximately 35 to 40 participants in our class. I had about 6 phone calls yesterday, people wanting to join us. Our Bees and Brews will be in November. We'll be at Rob Dobbs.
You mean February or January?
Yeah, why can't we do it in February?
What did I say?
said
November.
You know.
Okay, the next one is at Rob Dobbs next month. Tom Panconen is queen rearing next month, meeting, so,
So Valentine's Day is Bees and Brews.
okay, Bees and Brews will be Valentine's Day, so, okay, where are you gonna take us, Tom?
Just said, Rob. Actually, we might not be able to get in. Well,
Oh,
anyways, we'll take.
Oh,
Valentine's Day?
all right, okay, take it away, Tom, I'm out of here.
Yeah, so, let's see, we'll talk about meeting stuff later. I'll introduce Corey, actually, he doesn't even need any introduction, hopefully everybody's kind of heard of him a little bit, he's quite the legend. I've talked with him many times, both on Messenger and listened to his talks in person and heard him on YouTube a bazillion times, and he's a fantastic guy. He's kind of, I don't know, I guess I would say he's kind of picking up from some of the others and kind of running with things, and he's a real easygoing guy, a nice person to hear talk. So with that, Corey, I'll let you take it away.
Okay, can you make it bigger up there?
Well, he's gonna do screen sharing.
Okay.
Yeah, I'll share my screen here. Let's see. All right.
Got it.
Let's see here. Okay.
Looks good.
All right. Well, I appreciate that introduction. I'm gonna speak a little bit here about, a lot of people have heard the term VSH. Well, if you measure VSH or you score a colony, you're actually quantifying the bee's ability to suppress mite reproduction. So some of you bee nerds may know that they called VSH SMR before they called it VSH. Well, I don't think we should get rid of the term SMR, because I think that's what we're technically measuring here. And the more I know about VSH and the more I've done like UBO hygiene testing, the more SMR is almost like a separate function. So before I get too deep here, this is kind of what I'm planning to cover. What exactly is SMR, which is suppressed mite reproduction, or VSH, stands for Varroa sensitive hygiene. What is it? How do you measure it? That's one really cool thing about it, is in the past, I know people would try treatment-free beekeeping, or they would just kind of let natural selection work to see what resistance traits they would come up with, and it seemed like before we couldn't really put our hand on it. After John Harbaugh came out with his Harbaugh assay, after they discovered SMR or VSH, whichever you want to call it, he started a breeding group. Well, he taught all of us how to score it. And so I think that completely changed the game, because instead of just, it being something we couldn't measure, it was almost theoretical. Now we can actually measure it. How do you get VSH in your bees? A lot of people are interested in that. I've worked with different VSH lines for 12 years or more now. So I've seen a lot of different types of VSH, and I'm quite familiar with it. That's what I've obsessed over for quite some time. What I think you should expect out of VSH bees, and then kind of looking forward, VSH a part of just beekeeping in general. We'll do a Q&A. This isn't a really large group, so if I am not clear on something and you don't want to save it to Q&A, if somebody wants to jump in and just ask a question, you're welcome to. But if it's not something that I was just speaking about, or if you want to just hold on, we can just cover it in Q&A and have a good discussion. So what exactly is it? Suppressed mite reproduction, VSH, what is it? Well, whenever we imported Varroa mites, obviously it was a major emergency. Everybody's getting just destroyed by Varroa mites. And so they tasked the USDA bee lab, they tasked the scientists with a mission to discover mite resistance mechanisms and to select for them. So they did find it. It was actually a small number of colonies. I think it was like 12 that they had been given, that people said there's something to these bees. They have some means of resistance, but we don't know exactly what it is. And so they found out that in some bee colonies, the Varroa reproduction was inhibited or completely shut down. And they also said VSH isn't a breed of bee, it's a trait set. So you could breed VSH Italians. You can see my breeder queen here, how orange she is, and all of her workers are similarly colored. Most people would look at that and go, well, they're Italians. So you can have VSH Italians, you can have VSH Carni, you could have VSH Caucasian, if you selected really hard for it. It's not just going to fall out of the sky. It takes a lot of work to select for it. And John Harbaugh said it's an additive trait, as in you can stick it in other populations of bees, by making crosses and selecting for it. So again, it's not a breed of bee. VSH isn't a breed, it's just a trait set. And they first called it SMR, and that's because they didn't know what was going on other than the mites were being shut down. Like the bees would still get mites. If they're robbing something, mites would still come in, but they wouldn't let them reproduce or would inhibit it. Like a pure VSH or if you measured it on a Harbaugh scale, if it was 100% VSH, it's 100% suppressed mite reproduction. So you're finding mites, but they let 0 mites reproduce. It's amazing. They knew the bees were somehow limiting the mites reproduction. They just called it SMR. Later, they thought it was a hygiene function because of some of the Marla Spivak's work, and they changed it to Varroa sensitive hygiene. But to get a VSH score, you're measuring SMR, in my opinion. And this is all from Dr. John Harbaugh and company. There were others there, Jose Villa, Jeff Harris. There were several others down there that were working on this. But Harbaugh, I think, was kind of the one that came up with a scoring system and everything. So whenever you're SMR or VSH testing, you've got to have the right age pupa. You don't want them purple-eyed. You want them to be just past the purple-eyed stage to where they're starting to get some pigment. And that's for multiple reasons. You're pulling them out with a pair of forceps. I would advise getting some of the real fine pointed ones off of Amazon. I have stolen Jamie's out of her beauty kit to pull on brood frames, but it's not a good way to score brownie points with your wife. So I would get on Amazon and get I mean, for less than $10, you can get a whole kit of them. But when we first start, we're about to perform an assay. You can see I've got nukes in the truck, nuke boxes. We're going through these colonies and I've got number tags on them on the bottom boards. So when we find the appropriate age pupa, just by scratching it, I know I've got a band of ones that are mature. I'll write that number tag on the top of the frame and brush them off and put them in one of those nuke boxes. And, this is about a normal sample size, each of those holds 5 frames. So, that's about what we'll get done in a day and a half. This is a little video of us pulling frames, and Nathan at Duck River Honey was with us doing some video work to kind of document the process because there weren't really a lot of people doing this. And he took this video of me here. Well, that wasn't very nice of you. I actually didn't say anything bad there, but he added the bleeps just for theatrics, and I thought it was pretty funny. So how do you measure VSH? Like I said before, John Harbaugh came up with an assay. We called it a VSH assay. Assay is just a fancy word for test. It's a VSH test. So to get a VSH score, you're quantifying mite reproduction. So like in nature, there's like, I forget what John says, 16% approximately, 14%, something like that. I'm close. That percentage of mites just fail to reproduce, like something's just wrong with them. It's just like any other organism. Some of them just aren't reproductive. They're not able to for some reason. So if you're getting over the normal levels of mites that aren't reproducing, you get 35, 40, 50, 75, 100%, that's the bees. So we're quantifying mite reproduction here. It kind of sounds difficult, but really once I get down to it, it's not that big. It's not that big of a deal. Like we figured it out. I invited some friends down here. I'm like, yeah, we're going to VSH test. It's going to be great. They're like, okay. And they get down here and they're like, well, how do we do it? I'm like, I have no idea. It's on these papers. And so we figured it out. And the more you do it, the more obviously experience you get and the easier it gets. So mature worker brood are opened up and removed with forceps. So like I mentioned earlier, you want them past the purple-eyed stage. You don't want purple-eyed workers. You want them to start to have some pigment. Then whenever you start to pull them out, they don't just vaporize. Plus, it gives the mites every opportunity to reproduce. And whenever that purple-eyed phase is, that's whenever the bees are dealing with it. So if they're going to remove them and interrupt that mite reproduction, it's going to be in the purple-eyed phase. So you want to wait and give them an opportunity to clean it up. That way you get an accurate score. And we have a spreadsheet. We'll put colony number, number of reproductive. So if you get in there and you see the mother mite, most of you have probably seen female mites. It's just a, kind of an oval shaped reddish brown little mite that is extremely quick and agile for supposedly being blind. But if you just see her, you open it up, pull out the pupa, don't look at the pupa, look down in the cell and make sure there's no babies crawling around, and then look at the pupa. If you just pull it out and look at the pupa, which is what you want to do, then you don't remember exactly which cell you pulled it out of. So you can see Erin here, Erin Mullins. She's the state fair chair for Missouri State Beekeepers, or was. I have these little 10X. It's like a magnifier with an LED halo on it. Those are great for measuring VSH. And I've got these grafting frames here that I use, and I got them from Kelly Bees way back in the day. They work really well, and you don't necessarily have to have magnification if you've got really good eyes. I just have a headlamp on and to where it's very bright and I can see down in there, and that's adequate for me. It just depends on how your eyesight is and if you want to spend money on a magnifier. So on that spreadsheet, we put the number of the colony, If you see non-reproductive mites, you make a tally mark in non-reproductive. If you see reproductives, you give them a mark in the reproductives category. Simple. The colonies are scored. It's just they call it a simplified Harbo assay. Like there's some where you can do way more brood, but if you've got a good mite load, I say a good mite load, an adequate mite load. If you just treated your bees, you're not going to get a good score. You're going to get a false positive. You know, that wasn't your bees that cleaned up the mites. That was Amatraz. So we want to get a mite load to where you can get a definitive score. 4s suppress 100% of mite reproduction, and as you stair step it down, you know, they are able to suppress mite reproduction to a much lesser degree. And it's a great, fun beekeeping activity. I'm just kidding, that's a lie. Some people do enjoy it, but it's pretty tedious. So this is the Harbo score chart. You really just kind of have to get some data and then start looking at it. There are certain instances where the left-hand column and the right-hand column can be slightly confusing, but overall it's pretty straightforward. And you know, like here, 0 out of 200s, if you don't find any mites in 200 cells and those bees haven't been cleaned up with miticides, you know, I don't know how long it takes exactly. That's one reason I don't use miticides, and a lot of people gasp whenever they hear that. But you know, my focus was breeding for mite resistance, and if I kept intervening, I couldn't tell what natural ability the bees had. You know, I don't think that not treating is a good management approach. You know, unless you're breeding specifically for mite resistance, because the trade-offs are going to outweigh the benefits. Oh, I should have said too, to get this score chart, and there's a large how-to sheet, like what you're looking for, pictures of the appropriate age pupa, all that stuff. If you Google Harbo Bee Company, that's Dr. John Harbo, retired USDA bee scientist. If you click on VSH, and then I think there's a measure VSH tab, you can get the whole how-to. You'll have the score chart. That's where I got it. So I said before, some people don't enjoy doing it. It can be rather tedious. So we try to do something, have fun, hang out. This year I got box seat tickets to the rodeo. So Erin here, that helps me out, Erin Mullen, she owns a buck and bull and loves rodeo. So she was pretty stoked whenever we got tickets to the rodeo. Here's another group. Erin was back, Kyle Day, Will Salmons lives around St. Louis. I think he may be on the Illinois side. And then Eugene Makovic, some of you may recognize him. He is the editor of American Bee Journal. So he wanted to come down and see what the fuss is all about. And we get really good data. Again, Eugene, me, this is my wife, Jamie, Kyle Day. He's coordinating conferences for Missouri State Beekeepers. Erin, I think, is kind of getting back involved. She was the state fair chair, and then Will Salmons. Eugene, again, you can see, you know, there's different groups of people coming in. If you just do this yourself, whew, I mean, unless you just have tons of free time, it can take quite a while to get a bunch of data. So I'll invite people over, we'll hang out, have a good time. And if you've got 6 or 7 people or more, it's just a lot easier to get through colonies, find what you need. And plus I'm able to teach them. So I'm kind of spreading the word, and other people are getting to experience this too. So this is Nathan, the bleepity bleep video you saw earlier. This is him, Duck River Honey. He's got a YouTube channel. This is Dawn and Chris Summers here. Hitch Hive Honey, they're in Missouri, and Natalie, she's got a YouTube channel, Beekeeping with Natalie. She's come down and helped me queen rear and helped me VSH test. So a lot of people, well, how do you get VSH in your bees? It sounds cool. Sounds like something I'd like to do. Well, how I started is I just bought breeders. I bought VSH breeders from Tom Glenn. and I was obsessed over VSH, so that if it didn't say VSH, I wasn't interested in it because I was really wanting to get a good, strong collection and showing of VSH so that I could start selecting and do my own thing. You can buy VSH queens or cells if you know somebody that has breeders or is actually testing, which is really kind of rare. Some people say their stuff is VSH, but they're not testing. And, it can be all over the place from 0 to, 75%, or occasionally you'll get some that are consistently 100. But the only ones I've seen that are consistently 100 are from Dr. John Harbaugh. Who would have thought the godfather of VSH would have strong VSH bees? But he's no spring chicken now. He's retired, and I think he may be sold out of breeders. Occasionally, some years he doesn't sell them, but it's time to pick up the torch here and do it ourselves. He's taught us a lot. So you can just test a whole bunch of bees and see who has it and who doesn't. That's the hardest way to do it. You're going to grind a lot and you're going to have to go through a lot of colonies typically. I think, I've heard Kara Wagner, her test overlaps heavily with VSH, or at least in our population. And she said about 2 to 4% of bees have a good expression of hygiene. So I would say it's probably the same with VSH. There's probably like 2 to 4% of colonies out there actually have measurable levels of it without selecting it and putting selection pressure on it. And that's the name of the game. If you buy VSH bees and then you don't select, and you just graft out of a daughter and then graft out of another daughter and graft out of another daughter, by the time you get several generations removed, you may not even have it anymore or have very low levels of it. If you're not selecting, it's hard to tell. So if you do test, raise queens from your highest scoring colonies. It's not rocket science. It's just weighted average. One of my breeder queens. Some queen cells, I always keep them in an incubator. I actually sell, believe it or not, a lot of virgin queens. They're way better to ship than queen cells. Queen cells, if UPS, and they work modern miracles every day, how they get most of the shipments on somebody's doorstep in Washington State or on the East Coast or Maine by the next business day is kind of a miracle. But occasionally, like you may have found out with Christmas gifts, you waited to the last minute to order. Sometimes they lose a package. If these cells show up a day after when they were supposed to deliver, because I only ship next day air, they're all dead. We're virgin queens. Here's some that just hatched out. I put them in JZBZ candy cages. I keep them in an incubator, and I add attendants really quickly. And those things are really the best type of queen to ship, even better than mated queens, I would say. Because mated queens, there was a study a while back, if they get too hot in the postage or in transit, it'll damage the sperm and her spermatheca. And so some of these queens that you order and they end up being drone layers or something's wrong with them. They could have been fine when they came from the breeder, but they could have just been damaged in transit. But with virgins, they mate whenever they get to your house. And so they're hardier than cells and they're less susceptible to heat damage than mated queens. So they work well. And I've got a whole separate method of introduction for virgins that I cover in other talks because it's different. You can't handle them just like a cell, or occasionally you can just run them in during swarm season and get away with it, but sometimes you get burned. So my experiences with VSH, not all VSH are created equal. Once I started measuring them, that was obvious. And some people, I think, just it sounds cool. It's a buzzword and they just say they have VSH bees because it sounds cool. Productive bees, you can have VSH bees. Like I said, it's an additive trait set. You can have VSH bees that are in a small colony that aren't real productive, and you can have 100% VSH bees that are in enormous, very productive colonies. So most of the stuff I've used was pretty productive, especially from Tom Glenn. earlier. And some of the stock I've worked with over the past couple of years is very productive. Some people worry about bees being too hygienic. I think that is mouthed among beekeepers as a concern, but basically unwarranted in most instances. People are always, it's one of the main questions I get. They're always really worried about it, and you almost never see that. It kind of stemmed, I think, from when the USDA had their breeding program early on. Some of the VSHBs they were breeding, which they're doing single drone inseminations, and they're kind of bending Mother Nature's will a little bit. Some of them were psycho-hygienic or would throw out too much brood, but they just culled those queens early in the breeding program and it took care of it. And I've not seen that. I've seen some that uncap a lot and really work brood, but they still have a large colony, with a lot of honey production on them. So I expect to see good brood patterns unless there's a real influx of mites, or there's a viral issue or something. They'll start throwing out pupa. I've heard some people say from the USDA breeding program that bees don't work, VSHBs don't work drones. They only work workers. Well, I was catching drones here for instrumental insemination, and this was on here maybe 10 or 15 minutes, and look at this, drone pupa. They were trying to throw them out, but there's these bars on the door and they were getting hung up in there because the drones don't fit through there well. So maybe it's just my line of bees that I've bred. I call them Missouri mite hunters. Maybe they just work brood more than an average VSH line. I don't know. There's not a lot of VSH lines for comparison, but mine work drone comb very well, which is good because everyone knows that's where the mites want to go. So I see VSH uncapping and recapping a lot. The uncapping, some people will mistake it, how you get online and argue with people online. I would post a picture of it and somebody's like, oh, wax moths. And I think wax moths probably could cause that, but I was like, dude, these are late March. There's no wax moths reproducing right now. It's not wax moths. And they would argue with me till the cows come home. But basically, high VSHBs will open them up to see what's going on in that cell, and you'll just see the pupa's face looking at you. It'll still develop as long as they don't drag it out or tear its head off and haul it out in pieces, which they often do. As long as they leave it alone, it'll still develop. So hygienic brood removal, some of you may see this where they're throwing out young pupa, or you'll look in front of the hive and you'll see corpses strewn about out there. A lot of that's just hygienic brood removal, but there's varying levels of hygiene. Sometimes you'll see them uncapping brood and leaving it open, or you'll see them hauling some brood out, but you get in there and the brood looks like trash. It looks horrible. Well, they have a low hygienic threshold and they're already getting overrun with mites or viruses. So if they're very hygienic, you don't see that in your brood. You'll see them throwing stuff out, but they're proactive. They don't wait till they're getting overrun. So just because you're seeing uncapped brood, it could either be a problem or it could be really good. It just depends on that level of hygiene. You'll have to test them to find out. Overall, VSHBs will keep lower mite loads because they don't let them reproduce. But whenever you're measuring SMR, especially if I'm doing late season SMR assays, like first week of September, sometimes I'll find, I found this multiple times, upwards of 5 non-reproductive mites in a sample, 0 reproductive. So they shut down mite reproduction 100%. Nobody's allowed to reproduce. But if you think about it, there's 5 non-reproductives and 100 pupa. How many bees are in an alcohol wash? 300. So 5 mites and 100. If you multiply that by 3, that's a 15 wash. So I step on people's toes when I say this, but I don't think alcohol wash is a good breeding metric. It's a good IPM metric, but I don't think it's a good breeding metric at all, because I think that VSHBs still get mites. If they're robbing something, their mite levels will spike. You'll do a wash and go, oh my gosh, this colony is terrible. It doesn't have mite resistance. Wrong. You would have to measure it to find out, but at least if you're doing that in my apiary, you would be throwing out 100% SMR queens. They just got a lot of mites. Now, if you wait and you don't, even if you didn't treat them and you go back in the springtime, it's hard to find mites because they didn't let them reproduce. And they're gonna, I'm sure some of them groom them off. I run a lot of screen bottom boards. Not all of them are screened, but you come back and the bees will take care of the mites. But if you washed them at an inopportune time, I don't think you can judge mite resistance on an alcohol wash. I think it's all over the place. I've seen bees that don't have resistance that have a low wash because they got lucky or they didn't rob, or you're selecting for something else, not mite resistance. Hopefully I'm not stepping on anybody's toes too hard. It's better than nothing. Looking at mite levels, it's better than just flying blind, but there's better ways of measuring mite resistance now. A Harbo SMR assay or the new UBO coming out, I think it's really promising. Here's a really cool thing that I found early on is I said I wasn't treating because I wanted to see what these bees are capable of. Well, I told you I bought these fancy Tom Glenn VSH Italian breeder queens, and I would raise queens out of those. If I saw a colony that had a lot of deformed wing virus in it, it's like their wings look like two little pieces of yarn. If I saw a bunch of bees in there with deformed wing virus, I would just replace the queen. Now, if you're just managing bees, you should replace the queen and then clean them up. But since I was wanting to see what those bees were capable of, I didn't treat them. I just replaced the queen. Within a couple months, if they survived and everything went well with a requeen, I would get in there and there were 0 bees with deformed wing virus. And this happened over and over and over and over again, to where I never saw deformed wing virus anymore, even after not treating. And I'd sent Randy Oliver some samples because he wanted untreated bees to look for A, B, and C strain deformed wing virus. And I think he wanted untreated bees so they could go, oh my gosh, that's, horrible. But I sent him all VSH samples, and deformed wing virus A was BL, below quantifiable levels. Deformed wing virus B, BL, below quantifiable levels. Deformed wing virus C, no, non-existent. So those bees were, I think what it is if there's a pupa that's sick or it's infested with a reproductive mite, they'll uncap it and throw it outside. So before that nurse bee can hatch out that's sick with deformed wing virus and start feeding all the brood and spreading it all around the colony, shoop, she gets thrown out of the club. So they keep lower viral loads. And I mentioned UBO. I won't get into UBO. That's a whole separate discussion. But we tested UBO in our apiaries with Kara Wagner, and I checked with her at the end of the year. And she had tested bees in 7 different countries, including some VSH lines. And she said our scores were unprecedented, that no one came close to as high of our percentage of our population that scored extremely high. So there was a big overlap, as I thought, with SMR testing and UBO testing. And in Kara's UBO data and her studies, what did she find? The high UBO colonies have extremely low viral loads. And I think it's because they're throwing those pupa out that are sick or infested before they spread and make more of a problem. You will not see chalk brood, American foul brood. You shouldn't see European foul brood if they have high VSH. But I had some mediocre measuring VSH a few years back, and I had a few colonies that had something that looked like EFB. I didn't do an EFB test, but it looked kind of like it. But but I can't say for sure because I know there was some aerial spraying because I'm in an agricultural area going on, and it was when there was hen bit and stuff in the fields. You know, I think they were spraying glyphosate or something to burn everything down so they could plant. And so I'm not sure if it was, you know, nutritional issues or what. I don't know. But you shouldn't see brood diseases. I used to see a lot of chalk brood before I used VSH lines, and now I haven't seen a single cell of it in 12 plus years.
Hey,
Like I
Corey,
said,
we had a quick
yes.
question.
Okay.
We had somebody in our audience here said, so with your VSH program, you're not using mite treatments. They're asking that question.
Yeah, that's correct. And I hate saying that because I know some people freak out because it's best practice to clean your bees up and keep track of your mites, and it is, you know, I'm an entomologist, so I look at things from an IPM perspective. I'm trained on IPM. That was drilled into our head. But also, if you look at an IPM pyramid, what to make it a solid IPM program, the cornerstone is host resistance. And I've been obsessed over breeding for host resistance. And so that's why I didn't use miticides, is because I couldn't see what was going on. And that was before I could even measure VSH. I was just wanting solid field observation. But then after I figured out how to measure VSH, a Harbo assay and a IPM program butt heads, because it's best to have data in the spring. But if you cleaned up your bees in the fall, it jacks with your data until you start to get a mite load again. So it makes even less sense for me to use miticides now, just because I can't see what's going on. Now, if you want to just use, that's the advantage of UBO, is that you don't have to have mite load. So UBO, I think, is a real promising test because it doesn't fight your IPM programs like a Harbo does. But no, I haven't used any kind of miticides in over 12 years. No miticides, no essential oils, no Fumagil B, no types of antibiotics, nothing. Period. Like I'll give my bees nutrition, like syrup or occasionally open pollen sub feeders, but no, I don't use any acaricides. And I mean, you know, we still lose hives. It's not like, you know, things don't happen. A lot of times it's because of operator error. You know, I dropped a queen in it and I didn't follow up on it, or I knew something was wrong with it and I was spread too thin. I didn't deal with it. So, you know, we still have issues, but, you know, out of our 150-ish colonies or so, I was talking about deformed wing virus. You know, I remember John Keefus said, if you find a mite or whatever, he'll give you 10 cents or something like that. Well, I tell people, if you find one bee in my apiary, and I have people come in and help me test from outside sources, if you find one bee with deformed wing virus, I'll give you $100 bill. So they're just keep much cleaner brood nests. And I think that, you know, the way my breeding program is working, I'm working with some commercial beekeepers to where they're running them to almonds or running them south. You know, they're using breeder queens of mine, and then they'll give me high performing F1. So the ones that come out of spring and they're just big colonies that are going to produce. They'll give me those queens back, and then I test them, and I'll use those for drones to inseminate the next round of queens. So I think it's a pretty innovative breeding program. I kind of learned from the USDA what they did right and what they've done wrong in my eyes, and it's easy to be critical in hindsight. They've done amazing things, like they found VSH and they've run the Paul line program back in the day. I don't know if it is what it used to be. I think they're still managing it. But whenever John Harbo was there and Tom Glenn was in on the deal, those bees were hard to kill. You know, a lot of people think if you just stop treating your bees, you'll get decimated. And you probably would if you don't pay attention to what stock you're using. but my bees actually started looking better whenever I stopped using miticides. And it's not because they weren't treated, it's because I completely did a 180 switch to nothing but VSH. So, you know, my apiaries actually started looking better, but I know that's not the norm. Okay, is that
We got,
any?
another question in there. I don't know if you can see the chat or not, or I can read it to you. If you don't mind reading the question, if you can see it, or you want me to read it?
Yeah, go ahead if you don't mind.
Yeah, it says, if you bring in a VSH virgin queen, how many generations can come off of that queen before they won't be VSH anymore? And how often do you recommend requeening with a VSH queen?
It's like a lot of beekeeping questions. The best answer is it depends. It depends on what she's mating with, you know, or did you buy a bunch of virgins? Because if you got a bunch of virgin queens out of a breeder queen, now this is assuming the breeder is actually selecting for it, and there are not a lot of people that are actually selecting for it. So, and have instrumental insemination. So I test all my colonies. I graft out of a high performing inseminated breeder queen. I catch all these drones out of high scoring colonies. So mom and dad are VSH. I sell daughters out of that. Regardless of what those daughters mate with, even if they're non-VSH drones, all of them that daughter mates with, 100% of those drones of all those queens for their entire life, all those drones that they produce are VSH. And the reason for that is because drones are unfertilized. So have you heard the saying, drones don't have a father, only a grandfather? That's because they're a recombinated set of their mother's DNA. So whatever grandfather and grandmother were, that's what the drones are, which is kind of crazy, but it's really allows, you know, someone who's producing instrumentally inseminated breeders like John Harbaugh, those people who buy those and raise a bazillion queens out of them, you can really inject that into a population. So if you buy a virgin queen, back to the original question, and you open mate it, that colony, regardless of what they mate with, is going to have a high level of resistance. All those drones are going to be pure VSH. Well, while that colony was making drones for her whole life, your neighbor's bees and your pharaoh bees are mating with the VSH. So again, it depends. Did you just buy one, or did you queen a whole yard with them? If you queened a whole yard with them and you stay after it, you can really keep it in your population, even if you don't have instrumental insemination. And the other part of the it depends is, are you selecting? You know, if you're on F2 or F3 generation, are you just grafting out the one that you think looks good, or did you test it? You know, did you test a batch of them and pick the highest scoring and then graft out of that? Well, if you did that, you're going to have higher levels of it, and you're going to keep high levels of it. If you're not testing, it could go down to just almost not measurable, you know, in theory. So yeah, there's like 3 layers of it depends on there, but that is a really good question. Did I miss part of that, or did I get that pretty good?
Yeah, and then the second half of that question is, how often do you recommend requeening with a VSH queen?
I don't requeen. Some of my friends requeen every year, you know, in the spring, so they don't have to chase swarms, and they make a lot of honey that way, having a fresh queen in there. You know, if you're just a honey producer and you want to not have to worry so much about having to, you know, use oxalic or whatever constantly to keep your bees in shape, if you want them to kind of pull some of their weight with mites, you know, you could use exclusively VSH. But on the flip side, as far as requeening, I don't requeen unless there's a problem. Or they're trying to swarm. If they're trying to swarm, that's what I use for cell builders. That's how I get those big, nice looking cells. But, you know, I'll move her to a retirement home and then requeen that colony. But I try not to kill her. If she still wants to do her thing, you know, I'll have 3-4-year-old queens oftentimes. Just because whenever they try to swarm, I'll just move them into a little nuke and let them start over. So I would just say requeen whenever you have problems. And, you know, if you have access to VSH queens, that's a positive thing, but there isn't a giant supply of them. I don't feel like it's getting better. It's getting better. All right, you want me to hammer on here?
Yep.
Okay. So reasonable expectations. I want to point out here, remember how I talked about bald brood or they're uncapping, and you can see the pupa's face. Look at this. That's one of my breeder queens that Kara tested with UBO2. This is a 100% SMR queen. They will not allow any mites to reproduce, period. And then she UBO tested them, and she thought something was wrong with the test because they usually, like a perfect UBO score, they uncap. Like if you got you look in that circle, and the whole circle of a high UBO colony would look like this. Every single one of those circles are uncapped. Well, we went back in 2 hours, which is the protocol. There was no pupa left hardly. Like in 2 hours, they didn't just uncap them; they threw them out. So Kara thought something was wrong with the test, but it was just my bees. They're freaks. So VSH bees still get mites. They just shut down mite reproduction, assuming it's a 4. There's varying levels of it because the colonies are a superorganism. They've got half sisters, subgroups in there. So, you know, 100% VSH expressing colony, I would say most of your sublines in there too are VSH or hygienic. You know, if you've got just a little bit of it in there, they have a hard time staying on top of mite reproduction. But if you keep selecting for it, you can get your levels up. It just has to be, you have to work for it. I would still rely on an IPM program. I know there was a question about me not treating. I don't want to say do as I say, not as I do, but you should know the risks if you don't want to treat your bees. You know, it can go poorly. If your bees don't have mite resistance, they can get chewed alive by mites. So you still want to, like I said, I'm an entomologist. You still want to rely on an IPM program. And even those VSH bees, if you have huge mite pressure and you're getting 15 or 20 wash, you know, you probably want to knock those things down. Now, if you don't, they have a way better chance of survival than non-VSH bees because they're keeping the viral levels low too. It's not just about mites, it's about viruses. So they're way more rugged, but stuff still happens. I mean, they're bees. You know, they can starve to death. They can, you know, get sprayed. You know, they can still die too. It's not like they're indestructible. They just have a big advantage. Treat as needed. If you've got neighbors that run a bunch of colonies, you know, and they carry a lot of mites, maybe they're not dealing with their mites well. If your bees are robbing them and they start to get overrun, you know, mites are a stressor. You probably should treat them as needed. Expected to see some uncapped or bald brood, like in this picture over here. Sometimes it's just a little cluster, you know, or a little patch of it, or one here and there. You know, you look at a whole frame and you'll see like half a dozen or 4, but it's not abnormal. It's not a bad thing in VSH. Actually, one of the first times I saw it, I had bought a Tom Glenn VSH breeder and I was replacing these queens with these big old giant VSH queens. Well, I get in this colony and I see like pupa faces looking at me and the edges are like humped up. I was like, oh, she's a drone layer, you know, I know what this is. And I killed her and threw her out in the grass. Otherwise, it was a big colony. It looked good. I was like, oh, she's shooting blanks. Well, I was on the interwebs later that evening, and the USDA, I think you can still find it if you dig, but it was like Harbo, Jose Villa, Jeff Harris, you know, some of the bee scientists there, they had like a sheet on VSH. And one of the first pictures is bald brood like this. And they say one of the first things you'll see with VSH that's a possible indicator is you'll see this. And sometimes the cells are heaped up. And I'm like, no, you know, because there was this brand new high VSH queen and I thought something was wrong and I pitched her and threw her out in the grass. So, you know, that was a hard lesson. So learn from my mistakes. And if you see this, don't be so quick to requeen her. You probably should test her and see if they've got high levels of VSH. And that long story I just told you about seeing that USDA bee scientist write up on VSH, they said uncapping is probably one of the first indicators of VSH. Further testing is needed, but it's the first visual indicator that it could be VSH. Some queen cells of mine. You know, if you're going to be doing tons of testing, you need to be doing a lot of queen rearing, because whenever you find those girls that have high levels of VSH, you know, you want daughter queens off of her. Give to your friends and neighbors. I took a picture of this. That's one of my breeder queens here, instrumentally inseminated. And look over here. There's a pupa they uncapped and drug out, and they're taking it off the frame. So looking forward, like I said before, I'm an entomologist. I was trained, like IPM has been drilled into my mind. Like we did so much stuff studying different IPM protocol, different IPM scientific studies. Like I studied a lot about IPM. And I think one of the main things whenever people just say IPM, whether it's in crops or whatever, they glaze over host resistance, which is like VSH or SMR or hygiene or grooming. People overlook that. They just go right to measuring where the economic threshold is and where I need to treat. But I think that's a mistake to overlook that. I really think this is like the holy grail here. It's the cornerstone of an IPM pyramid. If you don't have host resistance, you're just, whichever the way the winds blows, or you just got lucky if you don't have mites. Otherwise, you probably should just treat, because you're going to spend more time trying to figure out if you have a problem, and you probably do if you don't have host resistance. So VSH is a multi-benefit trait set. Like I said, you don't see brood diseases. They keep lower mite loads, they shut down mite reproduction, and they keep way lower viral loads. You know, I think Bee Informed Partnership maybe recently had a treatment threshold at 1 mite per 300. Like basically, if you find a mite, you need to treat them. And I think that's insane, first off. But second off, it's probably accurate, because most bees don't have viral resistance or mite resistance. So by the time you hit 1 per 300, your viral loads are already climbing. And even after you clean those mites up, the viruses are still there. So I think that's one massive benefit of VSH is viral resistance. So actually, I think you can probably tolerate higher thresholds where that is. You know, it's just you'll have to set it wherever you feel comfortable. I feel like people are slowly coming around. I mean, VSH is old news. I mean, they found it in the early 90s and were breeding for it through the 90s. You know, it's 2023 now. So this is not something we just figured out. It's just, I heard Jeff Harris speak the other day in Stoneville, Mississippi to a group of bee breeders. And he said, we did a good job of finding the trait and identifying it and pointing it out, like, hey, we found this. But he's like, we didn't really succeed with getting queens available on the market or get people to really adopt it. You know, they didn't share, I don't think they shared the simplified Harbo assay even until John started his breeding group a few years ago that I was in. Like before that, I don't think the USDA shared how to measure it even. So now we can measure it. I think with Amitraz starting to waver a little bit, they're starting to find pockets of resistant mites to Amitraz. And I don't know if there's a great new option. Maybe there is that I don't know about. But either way, it's a short-term fix. Like chemicals are always short-term. You know, like they'll work really good for a while, and then the insects or mites or whatever it is always find a way around it. In my entomology classes, one professor described it because of bees or bugs, insects, which any organism are kind of this way. He said it's because of genetic plasticity. Like they find their way around modes of action or how something kills them or damages them, it's so cool. They inevitably find a way around it. So even if they do have a cool new miticide out, we need to be focusing on host resistance. That's the only long-term solution. There's not many people selecting for VSH. I think I've been chattering about it on YouTube for a while, and Cayman Reynolds had me talk at a couple times at his big conference. I got to be a VIP this year at it, and got to talk about UBO and SMR testing, and so I think people are more open to it. They're paying attention, and I'm starting to see some small breeders that are saying, "Oh, I'm doing a VSH assay," So I think more people are starting to do it, and I think it's going to pick up as we go further along. So I think that's a positive thing. I want to sell queens. I'm leaving my day job around the first week of March this year. I've been with the company for almost 15 years, Nestle Purina. I'm a senior transportation rep for them. I'm going bee breeding and bee research full time this year. So don't get me wrong, I want to sell queens, but I don't want to corner the market either. More people need to do this, and I've got buddies that run spray planes. If Dow like oopsies and kills out a lot of my breeding stock on accident, it would be good if other people have this and are breeding for it, because then I could get queens from other sources and rebuild and start over. So we don't need to have all our eggs in one basket. But there's nothing easy about it. There's just not. But name one thing in life that's truly valuable and fulfilling and long-term sustaining that comes easy. Like, maybe it's just me, but that's just no way. So, and the goal is with IPM, the whole premise of IPM is to only treat when you need it and to treat as little as possible. And so you have to have strong host resistance to reduce miticides, and you could possibly eliminate them. I don't have a giant operation, I have 150 colonies or so, and we're going to scale up rapidly over the next couple years and go to pallets and a normal commercial setup. But anyway, I squirreled there. My brain lost track of what I was even saying. So I think that's the way to be able to eliminate and reduce miticides. I don't think there's any other way. All right. Thanks for bearing with me through that. Hopefully not too many people are asleep. But I would love it if you ask questions now. Some people don't feel comfortable asking a question out loud, but I think you should. And here's some of my contact info if you're interested in queens, or I put blog posts out. You can subscribe to my website. I don't send a bunch of spam. I'll let you know whenever I got queens. There's my email. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram a little bit. I'm going to put out a lot more YouTube content this year now that I'll have more time to do so. And I did start a Patreon channel. I put coming soon, but I made it live today. If anybody really likes what we're doing and you want to support the cause, it still has training wheels on. I just launched it. I need to make different tiers and stuff, but if you want to support, that's one way to do it, or just buy queens. Do we want to put questions in the chat, or do you want to field them again like you had been doing?
I think they can just come off mic and talk if anybody's got questions.
Sounds good. Here, I'll stop screen sharing here.
Going back to that question about how many generations, are you thinking that VSH is a single gene,
No.
quantity of genes,
Yeah, it's a set.
dominant or recessive?
It's neither, at least according to John Harbaugh. That's why he called it additive. He's like, it's not really a recessive or a dominant. It's like it's a trait set. And maybe there are certain dominant or recessive, but even if it's RR recessive, if you're looking at the old squares where you used to have to figure out genetics, even if it's recessive, if you're selecting for it and both your parents, have it can be expressed. But the way, if I understood him correctly, he said he didn't view it as either dominant or recessive, but it's totally heritable, like I was just referencing. So if you're selecting for it and you are using those queens to graft from that have high levels of it, you can raise that frequency in your population. Or if you started off high, if you bought a bunch of it, you could actually keep it as long as you're keeping selection pressure on it. It's just like driving a car. If you take your hands off the wheel and you cover your eyes and you're not paying attention, you're going to veer off the road. It's the same with genetics. You have to keep that selection pressure on it.
I have a question. Richard Benson, Batavia, Illinois. We started off with Minnesota Hygienics, which was developed by Marla Spivak, and we had great success. And we have not bought packages nor queens from anybody else for the last 8 years. And now we're looking at trying to develop a local breeding program.
Totally.
Would you suggest getting some more influence of different DNA or different subjects from somebody like yourself? Or would you suggest that we start to do the hygienic testing on our own bees and develop from there? Thank you.
Well, selecting from what you have already is always a really cool thing. It's the hardest path, but I would say, in reference to freeze-killed brood, there's several studies to back this up. Whenever he said Minnesota Hygienics, they used a liquid nitrogen. They call it a freeze-killed brood assay. So
I'm familiar with it. Yes.
Yes. Well, that's a 24-hour test. The results basically say you're not going to get chalk brood. They're very resistant to brood diseases. It may or may not equal mite resistant. It was all over the place. So I wonder if they're selecting for only part of the gene set potentially. If I was you, I would use an updated test. I would use UBO that I mentioned. It's a little bit more expensive, but it's like hyper hygiene. So with the freeze killed brood, they kill all of them and then they come back 24 hours later. So they have 24 hours to clean this up. With a UBO test, you get 2 hours and the brood is not dead. They just spray stress pheromones on it. So it's like way of a more stringent test than a freeze-killed brood, and it shows statistically, according to data and research, it's far more accurate of a predictor for actual mite resistance. So freeze-killed brood is a good place to start, but I think if I were you, I would use UBO and just see what level of like hyper hygiene or BSH you have, and go from there. And if it's not high where you want it, then I would look at potentially bringing in something else. But you can create problems though. Like I've always looked out like, oh, I want some of that or I want some of this, and sometimes I would bring something else in, and I would gain something, but I would lose something that I had. So keep that in mind if you're bringing in other stuff. If you really like.
How do you do that with a time-lapse experience? Because a lot of this relates to me as one basically goal, and it takes you a year to collect that data, and then all of a sudden you start over the next year and like, holy shit, where do I start again? And we didn't even veer from where we were before. However, this last year, 2023, I mean, we were decimated with mites. I mean, we had no mite situation all the way up until August, and then there was a mite explosion.
Yeah.
And it's hard to say that I'm fearing that I lost 50% of my apiary due to it, which I'm even reluctant to even go look at this point. I just pushing that can.
Yeah, mites are a huge problem. What was the first part of your question you were saying?
I say, where do we start? Do we actually look
our-
at our data, what we've got, or do we look at you as going, hey, you know what? That's a different subject. That's completely. That's actually a proven. You opened my eyes up to a lot of situations, and I'm going, oh my gosh, hey, I'm already on your email list. I was
Awesome.
like, can I get 5 queens and we can nurture this in a different situation and basically cross structure the testing? And I'm open to getting queen cells or even virgin queens, because I have faith in the drones and where we are right now, just because of our honey load and what we're doing. We fully want to develop locally raised queens because they're adapted 100% to our environment. I don't want to get a Georgia or California or wherever, or I mean, we tested with some of the Hawaiian queens, totally dismal. I mean, they were replaced within 4 weeks.
Yep. Yeah, I would say, test what you got if you can. Again, just because you might have something that's really worth having there. Like you said, they're already locally adapted. They were previously hygiene tested, so you probably got higher levels of stuff anyway. But over time, it could get muddy. But I would just start the selection process. And if it's not where you want it to be, then you could always bring in virgin or cells. Beauty of those is it's my bees. That colony is going to be resistant. Those drones are going to be VSH, but it's also 50% year bees. If you've got something that's locally adapted and does well in your zone, with your forage, you've already automatically got a localized hybrid, and then keep selecting. And as far as you said earlier, how often do you test? I mean, typically once a year. You want good data before you start queen rearing. Like you said, do you start over every year? Well, is it the same queen? If you mark your queens and if it's the same queen, if you get a good Harbo, an SMR test on a queen, that follows her for life. It never changes. So you really only need to test as your queens overturn or as you requeen. And if you requeen, you have to wait 7 weeks or so before you can test them, because those aren't all her workers yet. You're going to get a false positive with it. So,
all right, remember Richard Benson, put him at the top of your email list.
Okay. Good questions.
Hey, wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. I really admire the fact that you put out that testing for the alcohol wash test or whatever you're going to do it, soda suds or whatever. But that is not a comparison level to the mites that are resistant within your hive itself. It's just what they bring in and what they do it from there. That really opened my eyes up. Thank you very much.
Yep. You're quite welcome. What else questions have you got? A stone I left unturned, or something you're seeing in your own bees?
Just looking at your site, I clicked on shop just to see what your virgins cost.
Mhm.
It says you're out of stock. When do you start evaluating when your virgins will be available? Is it like spring, April time frame, later?
Yep. Usually I start shipping around April 15. And sometimes I wrap up around the 3rd week of June or so. It just depends. If I still have nectar and pollen coming in, I can run up into the 4th of July, the first week of July. So I'm working on, since I'm going full time, I'm working on some early production options, to where I can go down south and get started early, but it's not going to be set up this year. And typically I would pre-sell queens like 1,000 or 1,500 or 2,000, whatever I thought I was going to produce during the year. And I would just pre-sell those, and then I would just work the list top to bottom. Man, you don't know what you have exactly until it's in your hand. And I have high standards, so anything that doesn't look quite right, or if I'm not happy with it, it gets cold. So and I don't have it until it's ready to ship. And people want to follow my virgin protocol, which you can read my blog post on my website to touch on that. I've got a whole nother talk on that. So they want to split a week early. That way they can cut all the cells out. Okay, gosh, I'll touch on it real quick. The short version is I call it the Stevens method because I'd never heard anyone articulate it before. But I'll make us either there's two ways. I'll make a split and feed them, and I wait 7 to 9 days. That's where I lose most beekeepers. The reason I do that is because it allows all those eggs to hatch. That's 3 days. 4 days is a perfect age to make emergency queens or graft. Day 5, they'll still make emergency queens. Day 6, Day 7, nope, they won't even try. So if I wait 7 days, I'll cut all those emergency cells out, and then I put candy caged virgins in. And by the time those virgins are out, those bees know that they're hosed, like they're hopelessly queenless. There's nothing they'll even try to make a queen cell out of. And so they love those queens. Like they may have wanted to kill them while they have queen cells. That's why most virgins get rejected, is because, you know, like an open mated queen has their full pheromone profile that suppresses the bee's urge to make cells. With virgin queens, they don't have that, and they're just in emergency mode. So you can either wait 7 to 9 days, cut all the cells, and add your queen, or if you want to wait till you get your queens in your hand, in case UPS loses them, and I guarantee live delivery, I'll send you new ones if they lose them. You'll split whenever you get those queens and tape over the candy and go ahead and put them in your split. Even if they want to kill those queens, they'll feed them and take care of them. And you just wait 7 days, go back, cut out all the cells, and then untape the candy, and your take will go way high. And I figured that out from getting instrumentally inseminated queens killed, because you don't inseminate until day 10 days after they've emerged. And it's like introducing old virgins. It's like the most difficult scenario. But if they're hopelessly queenless, they still have capped brood and they still have open brood, but they're just too old. They won't even try to make a queen out of it. Your take goes way high. And I thought I outsmarted the bees. Yeah, right. It didn't happen. What if I look at, okay, you look at your colony that wants to swarm really badly. What does that queen do before they all take off or stop doing? She quits laying eggs. And oftentimes they'll even hold those virgins in the cells. If you've ever seen them do that, they'll feed them, you know, where they cut, but they won't let them out. They keep them confined. So in nature, a lot of times whenever virgins are introduced, there's no eggs and there's no young larvae. There's just capped brood and older uncapped brood. So really, the Stevens method of virgin queen introduction is what I call it. It just mirrors nature. So if you order them, that was a really large rabbit hole that I just jumped into there. But what I was going to say is I'm not taking pre-orders this year because it's matching variable production to variable beekeeper schedules. I do logistics for a living, but it's just pure chaos. I need to spend more time doing research and more time rearing queens. So what I'm going to do is just post them online. Like if I know I've got 150 or I've got 400 that week, I just put them in my store, and you can order them immediately. They're ready to ship. If you missed, I'll add them weekly. So if you missed that week, you can request a back in stock notification. And as soon as I add those queens, it lets you know. So, and I'm working at a model. I mentioned Patreon. This isn't for everybody, but if people really want to support, there's some benefits that come along with it. And one of them is if you're a Patreon supporter, I'm going to give you unfair advantage. I get first take at queens. So that's one advantage of doing that. But really, if you want queens, subscribe to the website. I'll let people know when I'm starting to ship or when I'm getting ready to close it down for the year. or if I've got extra that week, I'll give you a heads up.
Corey,
Yes.
what is your price structure gonna be for your virgin queens?
I think they're going to be the same as last year. I've had them the same price for years, and the demand has left what I can produce. So I felt like I needed to bump it up a little bit, but my wife pushed back on it. So they may still be the same. I'll have to, if there is an increase, it may just be for smaller quantities. But in the past I've sold them for 25 a piece, and that was whether you bought one or you bought 100. It was just a flat rate. So they may be the same this year. Or if you're buying 10 or 20 at a time, a lot of people clubs will pool an order, and pool a bunch of smaller orders. Then you'll get a lower price. It'll probably be the same as what's on the website. And another thing too is I only ship next day air. I haven't found anything that's remotely close to. It's always UPS next day air, and it was around $65 last year. If you're out in the boonies, it'll be like by 2 p.m. And if you're close to a metropolitan area or a UPS store, a lot of times sometimes it was 8:30 or 9:30 in the morning. They're delivered already. So UPS next day air. And they're
That costs $65 a shipment.
Yep, and that's for upwards of 20 queens for sure. But I can tape those two JZBZ shippers, the orange shipper boxes together, and I think I can ship 40 for about the same price, because it seems like if the box is a little bit wider, it doesn't seem to bump the price up. So $65 for upwards of 40 queens. And if you're wanting to order 100 or more, they're in a bigger, those big JZBZ right way shippers and shipper bars, and the price goes up. But they're all shipped. They're all shipped with attendants in the cage, because I kept having a lot of club orders, and instead of just shaking, bees on it, it's way more of a pain in the butt to individually catch 6 workers in each tube. But at the same time, if you divvy up an order or you get to the post office, you want to look at it real quick to make sure they're not all dead. You don't open it up and there's bees everywhere. Everybody's contained. So it's more labor intensive, but I think it's better. Great questions.
Hey, Corey, I have a question.
Sure.
First off, I apologize if you hear my dog bark. She's trying to decide if she's choosing violence or not. I only have 4 beehives, and what is the best way for me to contribute? Obviously, this VSH is very, very important, but I'm just a small-time hobbyist beekeeper. What's the best way to contribute to that?
If you're interested in those queens, like if somebody's doing the hard selection work and they're actually breeding bees that have high levels of this, buying queens is a good way to support, and even if you only need 1 or 2 a year, collectively that adds up. It's going to be less problems for you to deal with. If you're using something that has host resistance, you just don't have the mite, the disease issues. So I think it makes beekeeping more pleasurable. So yeah, I would say just buy a couple queens. And the thing is too, if you're only needing a couple of them, man, that would be expensive to ship next day air. So if you've got friends that wanted to pool an order or something, I would probably look at that option if it's an option. Or if you want to drive to Southeast Missouri and take a scenic drive, some people will schedule a pickup appointment with me and just show up.
We'll try and do that, Corey, see if we can get
Okay.
a order for you.
Okay. But yeah, a lot of people just come down and pick them up. I've had people from, South Louisiana drove up and picked them up and brought me some gumbo. And I think I've shipped all the lower 48 states. So my bees are all over the place.
And you're not too far from us.
Mhm.
We're in Bloomington, Illinois, so.
Yeah, it's dry.
3 hours out of St. Louis.
Yep.
Obviously, it's ideal if this VSH trait, gets spread among all over the U.S. and among the native bees as well. What's the best way that that can happen all over the US. That seems like a daunting task.
It is, but at the same time, I feel like it's like here's how it looks now. But if more people are aware of it and starting to select for it and starting to demand that, especially out of commercial producers, once we kind of hit that critical mass where you've got a large percentage of people that are using those, people complain about southern packages coming out of Georgia. Well, if it's a southern package coming out of Georgia with a good VSH queen in it, I mean, more power to them. But I think the problem is that they're using stuff that just has no resistance mechanism, and that's why they have a bad reputation, of getting ate up with mites, or they'll have some undesirable characteristics sometimes. But yeah, I think that's it. And there was one commercial guy I was watching on Facebook, and he's like, some people make fun of VSH just because they're ignorant and they've never seen it, they don't understand it. They're like, I could care less about hygiene or VSH, it's ridiculous. Unless my customers demand it, then I'm interested in it. So there was some humor in that and a little snarkiness to it, but at the same time, if people want that and people are willing to pay for that, and they demand that and they know it's better, those breeders or those queen producers are gonna find stock that has that, and it's already picking up steam. I saw there was one of the bigger producers that had an ad that they were selling VSH queens, which I know the backstory to it, and I would like to see how they test. The guy that was telling me the backstory said he thinks that the test levels are going to be all over the place because of a couple factors and their selection criteria. But anyway, nonetheless, I think that's the thing, is if people ask for it and they want it and they see value in it, then, people will pick it up. And I also say there's the cool kids factor. If all the cool kids are doing it, like, it's on, everybody wants to do it too. So I think once people start talking about it more and using them and seeing how valuable they are, the rest will work itself out.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. And also, I say there's not a lot of these queens on the market. Instead of just selling a bunch of breeding stock, which is not a great way to make money from a breeder perspective, I'm working with some larger producers, and I don't have it available yet. We're still working out the details, but I'm working with some people that are very large producers of open mated queens, and we're working on a deal to where they would use my stock, and so they're selling breeder or virgin queens, well, open mated queens, because that's a premium product. People want open mated queens. They would be selling VSH, actually high VSH open mated queens on the open market. And I think that's the way to win it too, is like the USDA said that they made some highly resistant bees, but they failed to get it on the open market. I said I learned from their great successes and from their mistakes too, and I'm going to see what I can do to remedy that. And I think it's just working with larger producers to use that stock, and because all they got to do is just switch what queens they're grafting out of. They're already making open mated queens and they're already shipping them. They already know the business. It'd be just a matter of getting them to use VSH breeder queens. I think we're about there.
Working with Randy Oliver.
What's
And
that?
you mentioned working with Randy Oliver.
I've not worked with Randy before. I've met him one time, and that was actually was it December? Whenever the American Honey Producers meeting was in San Diego, I went there with Cayman Reynolds. He invited me to go with him, and I met Randy, and I was like, he sat down after we ate lunch, and me and him look at each other and we start talking. He's like, I got this new place that's isolated mating yard. And like, we start to nerd out, and then they go, everybody who's going on the USS Midway tour, we're leaving now. And I was like, no, because I had tickets with Cayman. Me and him went to visit the USS Midway Museum. And so I didn't get to talk to Randy. I've not emailed him. I've not talked to him on the phone. I need to contact him. Because
I was curious, not this year's HAS, but the year before HAS, he was a speaker there.
Yeah,
It sounds like he was talking about the same mating yard that he was talking to you about.
it could be. Yeah, he was pretty stoked about it. It sounded really awesome. And I mean, the guy's brilliant and he's a workhorse too. He's hard. He gets a lot of stuff done and gets a lot of data. So I want to talk to him. I'd love to have a recorded conversation with him, put on my YouTube, just because I think other people would learn from it too. And I know I would learn from it.
Yeah, I hadn't heard any more about that mating yard, so I was wondering if that just sort of fell through or if it's continuing.
It didn't act like it. This was just December or whatever of last year. It was the end of 23. I think it was December.
Okay.
Wrong. I would have to look. My brain is terrible about assigning dates to events. Like my grandpa would be like, "Oh yeah, August 3rd, 1956. It was sunny out, like 2 p.m. This was going on." My brain, I did not get that from him. Like my brain does not assign dates to events, but I'm okay at bees, so I'll stay in my lane.
He didn't sound like he was doing the Harbo thing as much as anything else.
Oh yeah, no. Randy's actually mainly using alcohol washes. And so whenever I poo-poo alcohol washes for selection criteria, I always have him in mind, and hopefully is not offended by it. I think that I want to talk to him about that just because, like I said earlier, if you're using strictly alcohol washes, I've seen pure VSH queens that Randy would have thrown out because their mite loads climbed too high. So I want to pitch that idea to him. Hopefully it doesn't maul me too bad, but either way, it would be a good learning experience. I guarantee you. And honestly, this year we're doing Harbo testing again. Of course, we're doing a more expansive UBO testing. And I really want to layer, because I layered Harbo data over UBO. That's how we figured out, Kara figured out that there was a high overlap in our population anyway. I want to show that alcohol wash data layered over the top of that. And then I can make a really strong case like, look, because I've seen it in multiple instances where alcohol wash and Harbo assays are at odds. They're not the same. It's not giving you good data if you're just looking at alcohol washes. So yeah, hopefully he's not too mad at me from poo-poo and alcohol wash, but at the same time, I'm zoned in on SMR and VSH. Randy's protocol could catch another resistance mechanism that we're not well aware of, or we haven't figured it out yet. And like I'm looking at through this, and I could throw out something good. You know what I mean? I'm just using my assays, so it's not like I think I'm right and Randy's wrong. Obviously, I just think that we need to look at different measures. I think I would love to UBO test at his place. Like, I think that would be epic. Or, if he hasn't treated, I would absolutely love to go out and do some SMR testing. I think that would be totally epic. And we'd both learn something, I guarantee it. I don't think I have it all figured out. I think if you get arrogant and you think you have it all figured out, you quit learning because you think you know it all. That's not a healthy position. I don't want to be there. So more to come on that. Maybe I'll get a hold of Randy. What other questions have you got?
Corey, I think we can let you go for the night. We'll take a couple minutes here to wrap up our meeting and stuff like that, but I sure appreciate you taking the time to talk with us and schooling us on your techniques and all that stuff and educating us all about good things here that I think a lot of people learn a lot of things.
Sure, good. I hope so. I learn more every time I'm in the bees. I feel like the more I know that I don't know. There's no bottom to it, and that's good because if I had it all figured out, I would get bored and want to go do something else. But thank you all very much for having me talk.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed it.
Thank you very much.
You guys had some great questions and have a great evening. Hopefully I'll catch you again.
Thanks,
Have an
Corey.
excellent
Thank you.
evening.
See you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye. How many did we have online?
We have 15 on Zoom. 15.
I'm sure that.
Ten person.
Club business. Okay. Club business, what do I need? What do I need to tell you?
Treasurer's account will,
Huh?
treasurer's. My in-person count had somebody out on a phone call, so.
Oh, how about February meeting?
Cover that in the beginning.
February meeting
Just
is.
want,
talking
just
about-
wanna let you,
Are you
just
gonna-
wanna let you guys,
Oh, hang on a second, go ahead.
Say it again.
Say it again.
just want to let you know that you guys did an awesome job. He is an awesome resource to the bee community.
Thank you very much. I'm glad you could join us.
Hold on. Hey, and this is Sherry Benson. I'm the president of the Fox Valley Beekeepers Association up here in Batavia, Northern. Is it you guys that I'm supposed to come and talk to for Highs for Heroes next month?
No, not that I know of.
Oh, okay. Because I know I'm coming down to like Peoria, so I wasn't sure which.
Okay, that's probably HUI, Heart of Illinois.
Gotcha. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Because I'm the Illinois State League for Highs for Heroes.
Uh-huh.
So, I just wanted to check in with you guys. All right,
Yeah.
perfect. Thank you.
Okay, I think we had actually a gentleman speak to us about Highs for Heroes about 2 years ago. He was, him and one of our beekeepers who were at Heartland Community College doing that Highs for Heroes. But I think he kind of graduated school and so kind of left the area, I believe.
He's still in the area, he just can't dropped out of the Highs for Heroes, he got overwhelmed with small.
Overwhelmed, that's the beekeeping can overwhelm a lot of us without those kind of, yeah, so,
So, so if you
okay,
guys have any questions or anything, I'm your state lead for
Okay.
Illinois. So please
Great.
let us know. All right.
all right,
Thank
that's
you
okay.
very much.
Can you put your contact info in the IM there?
Sure, I will do.
Thank you. Just about
Okay.
to do that.
Okay, we're working on our, our schedule for next year. We've got a, February, we've got a new building workshop. So it's it'll be at my place, will be, building nukes.
You got a shot.
So I've got to figure out pricing. So some of you guys are gonna have to help me on pricing. You know, whatever the cost is for the wood, we'll go ahead and cut it. We'll have Brad nailers. We'll have some frames that need to be put together and showing you how to build, use a frame jig. New building, might be some painting. I think, Tyler, didn't you help us with painting last year?
Yeah.
Yep, okay, I got more for you.
Funny is we just had the email pulled up, we're just gonna ask you about that. You should clean up some club hive equipment.
Yes,
and
yes, I've got,
some of those things, get that ready, help you out, some of
yeah,
that,
we'll get the flag,
snacks.
well, snacks, meat, that kind of stuff. Yeah, so it's just kind of a building workshop, the getting the club stuff ready, those kind of things. And like I said, new building, learning how to do that. There was something else I was thinking about. Yeah, so painting, some sanding, some painting of the hives that we have, cleaning up the frames, some of the frames, going through, I want to go through the traps boxes. Those are the ones that some need to be painted. Make sure the frames are good in those.
Says in the email, how to install plastic cell into frames.
Yeah,
That's
Yeah, we'll put together some general equipment that we have laying around to just to
Yeah.
kind of show how boxes go together and things like that.
Yeah.
For new people that are putting their gear together.
So we've got that is 17. What are some of the other things on our schedule?
Feed the Brews, February 14th.
Yeah, that's right.
We got at Rob Dobbs, but it's Valentine's Day, so.
We'll double check with them, then we get a section of the bar.
Okay.
We should be okay with the bar.
Overwhelm them.
Yeah.
We can burst our way in. We've been known to do that
I've
before.
never actually put together a nucleus before.
You did too.
No, not really a nuke like the one. in
Oh, with
it.
the structure.
Yeah, well, you get to do that this year then. I don't know, do you want more nukes?
Yeah, probably. With
Yeah.
my seated.
Yeah, so for whatever the cost of the wood is, that's gonna be the cost of the nuke. So that's how we'll put it together.
How about membership expiration?
Pay your
Fire
dues.
them, yeah.
Pay your dues. And stuff.
We already, asked you one little question about
Okay.
store boxes or swarm boxes.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so if hive beetles are drawn to former brood frames and you put brood frames in your swarm boxes, how do you keep from getting?
Not hive beetles.
The hive beetle?
Wax moth.
Wax moth.
I got a sample for a class, matter of fact. I go in and I do some checking. Actually, I've had more problems with ants in there than I have with wax moths. Really, I was, and then typically what I do is, okay, so it's 5 frames. I typically only put 1 frame of brood wax in there, so the other 4, because when they swarm, they're ready to build.
Okay.
And they kind of build themselves up, and that's where their idea is when they swarm. So I give them 4 to build on and just have the 1 there. I actually have to work on more on ants more than anything. The other thing I want to try to do is, that's why I got some change, is I've had some problems with the lids blowing off. And then it's getting
So
wet.
the good trick to that is you put a strap around the box and then put a strap around the box and then a strap around the tree.
Yeah,
What's membership cost?
20.
It's just 24.
Oh, no, it's okay, because you're board and equipment manager, yours is covered.
Oh, okay.
So never mind. So that's a perk of being a board member. Your membership or a presenter.
Oh, you're kidding.
If you're a
That's right.
presenter or a board member, you get your
Yes, I
membership now.
remember
We
that.
we voted on that in the meeting. You weren't paying attention.
I would have made attention. I think I sent you 20 bucks. Which I didn't see.
There's swarm traps, I'm sorry.
I didn't.
Okay.
Two straps around will help keep that lid from getting pulled off by like squirrels and raccoons and stuff like that.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but really swarm season is pretty early in the year for wax moth. You don't have as much
Yeah.
issue with wax moth that early in the season.
Yeah, but if you leave it out there a while,
Yeah,
don't
it's
bring
like,
it in.
Yeah.
I was trying to, I was trying to get away from the strap, and undoing it to look inside is kind of a.
Talk to 10 different
So
beekeepers.
I've got some other ideas I'm working on where it's an easier check. Because I have seen where it doesn't seem like there's or I see a lot of activity. And then I go in there and there's nobody, but then I've also seen it where it didn't seem like anybody's in there. And somebody was here.
So something that Mac does that I think is a good idea is he staples a piece of hardware cloth. He uses a 1/4 inch or whatever, and he staples that over the entrance hole from the inside. And that helps keep mice out of there and some of that stuff. I would-
Yeah, he had some, because that's where I got it. He had like regular chicken wire, but it kept, I had a run move in, so I did what you did, some bigger hardware.
You want hardware cloth, not chicken wire.
So can a queen get through 1/4 inch?
I forget the size.
I got bigger, big enough.
I
to
wasn't sure. Or
Yeah,
something.
it's a big size, so they can get through, but mice and like I said, a run move.
But you do want to have that hard cloth because man, the mice and the wrens are something.
Yeah, but yeah, I have the squirrels, and I've done some like drywall bead on the corners.
And you want it stapled on the inside, not on the outside. So you could probably do both sides, but a lot of times on the outside, I'll tear it off.
Raccoons.
Oh.
Yeah,
The birds will tear it off particularly.
Yeah.
So when do we put the traps out?
April.
okay, and so we can, I've got straps, and then we can put them on out.
So, like if anybody has deer hunters on their property, that's where the deer stands are, is a good spot to hang if they know what they're doing hunting. That's where you wanna look, that's where you wanna put your traps, cause like Where you want to hunt is typically like your funnels and your saddles. The bees will go the same corridors. So like a funnel is like where something necks down into a field, into some timber, for example, or a saddle is like where you have two areas and it comes down like this, or a bench is sometimes the opposite of that. Those are great spots to put swarm traps. Plus, you have a safer ladder to climb up a lot of times, and you can strap them in that deer stand. They hold up pretty good. I like putting it on places that where they mow. Because what I'll do is I'll just tell the landowner, hey, can you take a peek when you mow? So every time they go by and take a look up there, when they see a bunch of bees, then they tell me I don't have to go check them all.
Yeah, so I put them on my trails that I walk the dogs, so in a sense I see them, I walk by them once a day.
That's kind of what he was saying.
Yeah,
I've got
right,
a
like
friend that
that.
lives out in Carlock near the Mackinac, and he was interested in having us do bees or
Mhm.
setting up bees hives on his property, and we'd go out there and manage it for him. But he's got area right by protected ground and everything.
Uh-huh.
I just thought about setting something up.
Oh, yeah,
in his
absolutely,
area.
and typically,
Catch some bees.
another place that I have, I have had, where the trees where, oh, there's a swarm there, so I have like, where I caught swarms that are probably mine. That is not in the trap, but that's the tree I then set them in.
What I've heard, what I've been reading on, it's like they tend to go to the same.
Yeah,
spot.
like
Even
where
though
my,
it's the same bees, there's
yeah,
something about that.
my main bee yard, they have swarmed into that tree 3 times.
Yeah.
So it has a swarm trap.
Yeah, you don't have to get nutty either. Like, they don't have to be 20 feet up or whatever.
Right,
Like,
that's like
there's-
8 to 15 or something.
There's a group that they don't even need to be that high, really. There's a group that did a SARE grant out of Ohio. They're part of a breeding program that we participate in. They were trapping on Scott Air Force Base in Ohio. And they had, the guy said, well, I'm too fat and I'm too old to climb ladders to go pick up swarm traps. And that's a pretty smart practice. So what he did is he took blue drums, like 50-gallon drums, and he strapped that to the tree with tie-ons, and then he put a swarm trap on top of that blue drum. And they trapped, I think it was 320 or 330 swarms that season.
Yeah.
And
I
that's
had a swarm.
some of them, they took 5 out of the same spot.
I had a swarm fly into some equipment about 2 foot off the ground next to our guards last year.
Yeah. And also think about, okay, you want to put it where you can get it. And when, so, yeah, 20 feet is great, but I can't, and it's heavy. And, so when they get that for, trying to lift it, so you're gonna have to figure out, okay, how is this a way? It may be better up there, but I can't manage it.
You can put it where a food source is, like a bee's food source.
Well,
That's an easy way to get a swarm. Is put it where there's a food
You'd
source.
be surprised how many food sources they have.
There's tons of YouTube videos that can kind
There
of
are.
teach you some tricks, and some are for real and some of them aren't.
Yeah.
True. Yeah, definitely get out, just try it. Like,
Yeah.
it's a lot of fun to do.
But the funnest is when they're wrapped around a tree, just about 10, 12 feet up. It's like, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Around the base of the tree, or the trunk of the tree.
Yeah, I like it when they swarmed into a honey locust, which has a lot of thorns. And I'm not sure who stung me, and it was like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, or actually closer to 6, it was close to sunset when I found it.
Diabetes.
And it's kind of like, I don't know who stung me more, the tree or the bees. It was kind of like, but I got a big swarm out of it. That tree also got cut down.
So there was a guy at the North American Honeybee Expo, Ken Reynolds thing, just a month ago. He was across from us, and we're like, what is he trying to sell there? And what it was a 3D printed holder for a paint pole where you could put a brood frame on there, and then basically stick it way up to that swarm that you saw, and they'll basically cluster onto that brood frame. And then you can bring that frame down and shake them into the box.
And that's what I've done when I found a swarm in a tree. I'll take a frame, let them climb on. I'll either shake that one into the box or put that frame in there and another frame, because as soon as I lay the frame on it, they will climb onto it, and I'm kind of like, okay, rather than, the picking up and shaking. I found that being pretty
And then
successful.
climb back up.
I know, I do it quickly. I get down up the So, yeah, and like one time I had a swarm at a base of a tree, and again, it was a thorn tree, so I just laid the frame there, and you could see them just climb all over it, and I just had to put it in the box that way. So that, you know, just a free swarm, not a box swarm, so.
Home smells more like home.
Amen.
Now's a great time to build those swarm traps.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't know if we have,
Tree.
I don't know if we have, yeah, you know,
It's basically the same way.
yeah.
We're gonna try.
Yeah. Okay, so what you need to do is find me swarm trap plants.
I got
Okay,
I've been seeing them with 5 gallon buckets as well.
The Cornell University ones are the ones you want. They're basically a new box, but it's a
Deeper.
it's a deep frame and a half. So it's like 20 liters, I think, is the volume. But they did a bunch of research from Cornell and said that that's like the ideal volume that the bees want. They tested all different.
And it's protected, and it's light, and it's got a handle, man, that'd be,
light, matter of perspective.
I said, put the bucket one.
Oh,
Oh, we got.
So the class.
Could put,
The
carry
plastic
carry
tree-
those, all these swarm traps up and down at deer stand or the.
we probably have,
That's where you get two straps.
we probably have about 40 people in our class. I've got, I went and took a picture of the class, of the door we're gonna go in to help with a map. People, okay, this is the door you're going in, this is the door you're looking for, because we'll be on the back side.
That, the black block
Are you
and
sending that
pulley.
to us too?
Yes,
Okay.
all presenters and.
What
board
time
members
is
and
it?
participants.
I've got it.
She said 7:30. 7:30.
Yeah.
Is there, drinking fountain, water nearby?
There should be, then we're in the cafeteria, or we're next to the cafeteria. Okay, and so I've
Gotta
got
have our
pictures
phone.
and the 5 gallon buckets, and I got pictures
Yeah.
for that. Should be a
Run it back
plug for
down the
the,
hallway
I would
that
bring an
goes up.
extension cord, just to make sure.
Yeah.
it's wet.
Yeah, I got.
We've got plenty of tables. I should have taken, when I went and looked, I should have taken pictures of the room. Plenty of tables, front,
It's a senior cafeteria, right?
yeah.
It's just a big open space with lots of tables.
yeah.
It's
The
really
one thing I asked Liz, she hasn't got back to me about a mic for the speaker. Having a mic for the speaker.
So are they tables with chairs like this, or are they? Benches?
No,
They get
they're rectangle tables, you know, like, the standard 8-footers. About,
Okay.
okay, they've got lots of chairs, so we'll be able to have in the same room. Okay, kind of like the tables around the edges where, you know, okay, the grand prize here, door prizes here, display over here, food back here. I'm probably gonna suggest food at the back. That's kind of closer to the cafeteria in the bathroom.
That's fine.
and-
Where our
and-
plug-in is.
Yeah, and so, you know, the registration,
Gotta have
that,
the cost.
Kathy's gonna help me with, and Val's gonna help me with in the morning. I had about 6 people call me yesterday wanting in the class, and I just said, oh, okay, send me a name, address, and email, and I'll set you up as an IOU at the door.
Okay, well, let me know any changes, because Thursday night I'm probably going out to
Okay.
get.
I could have a real close number. Yeah,
Not to clarify there.
yeah.
No.
All right, let's see, what else?
Tino's like.
Get the
yeah,
agenda.
so that-
Sorry.
everything.
That was a little hanging fruit.
agenda?
Yes, I did. I don't know why I couldn't find it. Yes, I did, thank you. Yes, I did. I went through email. I couldn't remember. I looked on Google, so, okay, so
We're rich.
I need a motion to dismiss,
Make a
maybe,
motion.
second?
Second.
Second, all right, thank you, bye, Kathy.
It's only
Yeah,
us
Kathy's still
and Kathy's still on.
That's how we are.
Oh, Lord, what? Yeah, I don't know.
That's who's that troublemaker.
The smart ones, they.